Welcome everyone to Professional Pioneers with Provision Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Muhammad Junaid Ismail, and as you may well know, Provision Alliance NGO has set its sights on eradicating unemployment, helping the youth discover and forge their dream careers, and propelling them into becoming the future leaders of industry that our country so desperately needs. This podcast is inspired to help aspiring professionals understand and discover the careers they may well go into. Have you ever found yourself asking, how do I become a doctor or a lawyer? How do I start a business? Where do I study? And how do I get funding? These are some of the questions we will be answering on our podcast. With our variety of guests who come from humble beginnings and have inspirational stories of how they've overcome the obstacles. And here is where they will share their advice and wisdom they've gotten along the way.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to Professional Pioneers podcast with Provision Alliance. We've been running this podcast for quite some time, and as you know, we bring you guests of people that have valuable information for our students and share this information about their careers, their journey, some of the difficulties they might have faced, and they share their wisdom with us to help our students achieve their goals, but also to provide some information for everyone else watching about things they might not know about the career or the field that our guest is in. Our guest today is Kreyan. He is an economist, and he'll tell you a bit more about himself. But one thing you need to know is Kreyan is going to tell us how to deal with our money and how to use our skills to make more money, essentially. So, welcome, Kreyan. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Junaid. I really appreciate it.
All right. So maybe you can start by introducing yourself and what you do and how you got into that career.
Cool, thanks. Well, my name is Kreyan Shunmugam, an economist by trade. What does an economist do? I think we hear this word flying around a lot in the media, on radio. Economists is talking about the economy and whatever. But economists are concerned with the scarcity of things.
Okay.
Right? Whether the scarcity be an actual resource, physical resource, or your time. So we're just studying how best to use scarce things.
Okay.
Yeah. What do I do on a day-to-day basis? And I advise government and the private sector on how to solve complex economic problems.
Okay. Sounds like a tough job in South Africa.
Yes, very.
Okay. And why did you choose to go into that field, if it was a choice at all?
So it was a choice. I actually did want to study politics, but my dad said no. But Indian dads.
Yeah.
But actually no. So to be honest with you and to be frank, when I was about 17 years old, I just Googled what are the most important jobs in the next 10 years.
Okay.
And I was
Quite
going
smart.
down the list. And I was like, engineer, I can't do that. Not smart enough for that.
Okay.
And then I was just going down and I got to economist and I was like, what is this? And I kind of went further and I was like, okay, cool. This is a cool combination of social science, a little bit of maths, a little bit of politics, a little bit of history, trying to solve abstract problems.
Yeah.
And trying to help people, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So it sounds like you did quite a bit of research, and I think that's so important for our students, because a lot of the time when you're young and impressionable, people will tell you maybe you should do this, like if you get good marks, maybe you should be a doctor or an engineer. But if we look at the world today, there's a lot of jobs that's coming up, especially with technology and AI and such. So it's very important to do your research as to know what is out there and what, as Kreyan said, I think that's very valuable. Looking at the future in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, what's going to be valuable. So in your time at university and in your career, is there any pivotal moments that shaped your career path or even prior to actually studying?
So I was always quite sensitized by my environment and my parents about, the job market.
Yeah.
Right. That was always something that was front of mind for me.
Yeah.
So I always had a sort of a tick on it. I was okay, which jobs are going to be relevant, etc.
Yeah.
But what actually helped me was just sort of being real with myself and focusing on what I'm talented at. That was really the first step of identifying, like the pivotal moment was actually being real and honest with myself, what I am able to do and what I actually can't do.
Yeah.
That was quite pivotal, and that happened quite early because of my parents.
That's quite valuable, because that takes knowing yourself to a certain degree, being self-aware, and then being able to acknowledge that certain things is not for you.
Definitely.
And doesn't really suit your skill set to a certain degree. Very funny, I was watching Diary of a CEO, was listening to it when I go to work. And one of the things they mentioned there was, this Venn diagram of your unfair advantage, which would be your network, or kind of the people that you know, or like your parents, for example, they help you in that regard, and your skills. And then the other part is your network of people. So more people outside of your immediate family that can help you leverage what you want to do. And there was another thing, but I think the important thing there is just being able to identify what are the skills that you have. And I think the third one was your passion, like what drives you. Okay, so based on that assessment, what did you identify as things you could do and things you couldn't do, and why did that lead you to economist?
So basically, I always, in high school, right, there's this thing where everyone's telling us what to do, right? And I think the first place to look, and it's often an abstract or easy place to look, like which class are you happiest in? Where do you feel most yourself, right? And I found that I felt most myself when I was in history and geography.
Yeah.
And we had a class in my school called Developmental Studies, but I don't think they offered that in the South African curriculum. But I felt very much myself in those fields, in those classes. I understood why we were here, what we were doing, what we were trying to achieve. And I think that was the first sort of, which field do I feel most comfortable in? Then I looked at my grades. Which field am I actually performing in? And being honest with my grades and being like, okay, I'm getting a 60 or 70 in maths, but I know I can do better. Doesn't mean that you're getting a bad grade in maths. Doesn't mean that you should cut that off, right? But just knowing yourself, really being like, okay, I'm getting 60 or whatever, I should do better. If you know that I'm not that interested in maths, or I'm not that interested in English, don't force yourself to do something that requires it.
Yeah,
basically.
that makes sense. Yeah.
And then the next thing I did was, so that was knowing myself, or knowing where I was comfortable, knowing what I was good at, what were my talents, and then that third part of the Venn diagram is knowing what the world or the market needs. That's what's most critical and most painful for some of us, because sometimes we figure out that, what I really like isn't what's needed. But if you think deeper, actually a lot of things are needed. So
I think that kind of highlights an important point, that one, you had to be exposed to those subjects or those things in order to know whether it aligned with you. And so if we are only exposed in school, for example, to 7 subjects, and even in that exposure you might have a horrible teacher and they ruin the experience for you. So I think exposing yourself to new things kind of allows you to know yourself better and to know where those hidden skills lie. Because it kind of reminds me of this quote by Albert Einstein, where he says, if you judge a fish for its ability to climb a tree, it's always going to believe that it's useless.
Definitely.
And kind of some people go through life not being exposed to anything other than the school curriculum and then what's in their immediate environment. And so it's kind of like always being in a forest and never venturing out of the forest, and you're a fish.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that's quite interesting. All right, so in your journey to qualifying as an economist, and even through your master's, what are some challenges that you think really shaped who you are and what you do?
So I guess in trying to become an economist, the challenges that really hit home for me was, economics is a wide field, right? That's the first thing I want to just mention. So, I think people think about numbers too much when they think about economics. When in fact it's not numbers, it's thinking macros, thinking high level and how things connect to each other. right? And I think a challenge was accepting that maybe my technical, statistical skills weren't sort of the best, right? But seeing that as an opportunity to be like, okay, the mainstream economics, sort of the econometrics, the stuff that you learn in the first part of your degree, I was good at it, but as we were getting deeper, it kind of became a bit more challenging as we became more statistical, more quantitative. I realized that actually there's a niche, there's alternative types of economics. You know, there's history of economic thought, there's sort of development economics, which are more qualitative. Still, there's some sort of descriptive data kind of stuff, but I realized that, okay, I'm gonna have to become a unique kind of economist, right? And I learned that sort of maybe in honors when I was, you know, not doing as well as I was doing in undergrad, and I was like, I need to think differently. And then I made a choice, basically, that, okay, I'm not going to do my master's I worked for a bit in between honors and masters, and I made a choice that I'm not going to do a mainstream economics degree, master's. I actually ended up doing economic development, which is a subfield of economics, but economics nonetheless. And it is focused with why countries or people or regions are poor and how we can make them, quote unquote, better off. Or you get what I'm saying.
Okay. So there were a couple of things there, but I think first I want you to maybe explain to some of the viewers that don't know what qualitative versus quantitative is, in a sense, and then from there, okay, let's start there and then we'll move on.
Okay, so quantitative, think about numbers. So anything that's quantitative, your stats, so understanding the average, or maybe understanding, things like that, right? So with qualitative, think more around sort of what people have said, right? A piece of information that someone has said, passages from describing sort of what's going around us. Categorization, that's more qualitative in nature.
Okay, I get it. Okay. Then one of the other things you mentioned was you did your honors and then you did your master's. So it sounds like up until even honors, you didn't really know what you wanted to do with what you were doing. But what prompted you to do your master's? Was it just because you knew that education was important, or at your honors level you felt, I don't quite know what I want to do? You know, so which was it, or was it a bit of both?
It was a combination of things. I think one, for everyone to understand that economics is a field where you aren't really considered an economist until you get your master's. So that's kind of almost, think about how CAs need to do a PhD. Yeah, they need to do all that. To become an economist, there's no official qualification board or anything.
Okay.
So people generally tend to get their master's degree to be an economist. Right?
I see.
But I also realized that the labor market, to differentiate myself, I would probably go a lot further if I get a master's degree, and also just because I'm passionate about it and I really wanted to learn more.
Okay.
That's it.
So, from your perspective, right, what are some of the skills that people need to succeed? I know it's a bit slightly off track, but I think for young people as students, but also for unemployed people in trying to break into the labor market, that before you kind of needed a degree of sorts or some sort of piece of paper to say you have this qualification. But I think things are kind of moving in a different direction. So what would be your advice in terms of skills, like basic skills that people need to succeed?
So this is going to sound a bit strange and maybe simple, but I think a skill that is often overlooked is the ability to read, right? Reading widely and reading in depth, right? If you aren't able to ascertain or obtain information, right, you're not going to be able to fully understand things. But it's not impossible. It's that, you know, there's some barriers to reading. You know, like where should I get the content or the materials to read? But you know, I think with the internet it's pretty easy. So reading widely and reading to understand, and just really you'll notice that you start being able to talk about topics you couldn't have before with confidence. And people recognize that. And I think the second one and again, these are abstract, softer skills, is the ability to communicate, right? And I think reading will support that. So being able to talk confidently, reading people, and sort of knowing when to take a hint, understanding tone and your audience and things like that, goes a long way. Especially if you think about jobs like sales. You don't really need technical skills to get into sales, but you need to be able to know how to talk to people. And you need to be able to ascertain knowledge and remember and retain knowledge. So if you see those two as skills that you can combine, and that's a job. You know what I mean?
I think that's very valuable because people don't think of those things.
No.
They assume that it's a given. And I think, especially with communication, people think that, communication is about saying things. And a lot of as we know, a large proportion of communication, I don't know the exact statistic, but is non-verbal. So it's social cues, tone, body language, facial expressions, that sort of thing. And me having done a year in psychiatry, I've really started to focus on how people's behavior or kind of affects their actions, or how their physical behavior kind of translates into something that they are trying to communicate. Because sometimes you have a patient that is maybe selectively mute, and you kind of need to read their behavior in a sense. But I really love that you pointed that out, because people take that for granted. People don't focus on learning how to communicate. I think, especially for the younger generations and with COVID, it definitely affected people's ability to communicate in person. I think a lot of the kind of social media and spending a lot of screen time, people lose that ability to recognize social cues. And I think reading also kind of ties into that, because you're so used to getting information through video content that it's so difficult to sit and read. I think, even myself, I'll be honest, I can read something if I find it interesting. And that's the difficulty. And I think a lot of people face that difficulty because of, being online chronically and having that high dopamine requirements. But I think that's very valuable. So thank you for sharing that. So how do you think then, students and unemployed youth can make the most of free or affordable resources to build skills and to make themselves valuable in the market?
So going back to my previous answer about reading, we always talk about the public library, right? That's a nice place to start. Obviously, not everyone has a public library near them. Sometimes it's inaccessible, right? I think the second place I think of is the internet, and then obviously I think about data, right? That can be costly for people, etc. But the Department of Basic Education has a few zero-rated sites, so you can get access to learning materials for free, right? I think they have some. And I think that program is still happening. So you can get your sort of curriculum from that. But I mean, today with AI. With simple things like YouTube. I personally learn a lot from YouTube. And you can tweak your algorithm to sort of get to where you want, to the things you want to learn about. So I'd say just leveraging those sort of free tools.
Okay. Some of the tools I think I've also come across is a website called Allison. I know they give a lot of free courses on there. And then with YouTube, there's certain channels like Khan Academy for academic stuff, TED Talks for more conceptual things, podcasts as well, Diary of a CEO, they have a lot of stuff there.
There's a school of life that's pretty good for just sort of psychology and understanding yourself and your interpersonal relationships, which I think is just as important as your academic aspirations.
That's very true. That's something we noticed in the mentoring program, is that we came into the mentoring program saying, okay, we're going to provide study skills, we're going to provide guidance, career guidance, that sort of thing, pairing, mentees with professionals that are in the fields that they are interested in. But along the journey, we found that there's a lot more to that are barriers that's blocking that ability to learn, whether it's personal stuff, whether it's social issues. And so you learn that in a person's life, it's not just like sometimes maybe a teacher will look at a student and say, this student's doing poorly because they're stupid. But, the student might go home and, there might be a lot of turbulence at home. A lot of students grow up in homes where there's drug abuse or violence, whatever. So, in my experience in the Cape Flats, there's a lot more to why people can't succeed. And it's a lot broader. So I think I like that you shared that School of Life channel, because we take for granted that, your social circumstance and your economic circumstances greatly affects your ability to learn and your ability to succeed. One of the things I really hate when people say is like, work hard. But there's people that, sweep the street, or, janitors, or, there's people in fields where they work extremely hard, so many hours a day, and they earn so little. And then there's people who don't really work that hard and they earn so much more. And it has very little to do with working hard and a lot more to do with, what resources were they able to access, were they able to fail fast, were they able to try new things, that sort of thing. But coming to the kind of other side of mentoring, networking as well. Can you explain from your perspective what networking is and why it's valuable?
So yeah, networking is something that I only really understood post university, right? When I was in university, I just realized, oh yeah, I'm making friends with people and we're hanging out and we're talking about nothing.
Yeah.
And then after university, I quickly realized, all of that making friends and stuff was actually networking, because now I have a pool of friends who went on to do impressive things.
Yeah.
Right? So that's my network, right? That's my network is just the people I know. But my network is also the people who I can exchange ideas with.
Yeah.
And by that idea exchange, we can identify gaps and we can identify how to add value to society. That's just a fancy way of saying make money, right?
Yeah.
But that, in my idea, is networking is softer. Networking isn't asking people for things. That's not networking. Asking people for jobs, asking people for opportunities, that's not networking. Networking is actually getting to know someone and understanding what it is, who are they, and being authentic and honest. This person is this person is that, respecting whatever that is and recognizing their value, right? That's kind of what networking is, I think. And you'll see that when you focus on creating the relationship and sort of what you have in common, etc., instead of focusing on what people think networking is, where people think networking is just asking,
like, what can I get
from you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that's really valuable, because similar to you, I think I was a bit more exposed to networking just because of the scholarship I was in, and they kind of taught us that networking and branding is important. But similar to you, like a lot of the professionals that joined the NGO were professionals that I went to university. Lawyers, yourself, economists, engineers, I can go on and on and on. And that networking is so important, not just when you need things, but it allows you to have more access to more skills. You know what I mean? And it also allows you to have more information, because through networking, let's say you know someone that is a lawyer, and you chat to them and whatever, and through getting to know them, you will naturally get to know some things in their field that might help you, or that might be helpful. But yeah, I really love your answer. So then you say that, networking is finding someone's value. Um, how do you define then someone's value? Like let's say you were at an event and you were networking and you meet this young entrepreneur and they own like a chicken business, they're selling chickens. Like, how do you derive value from that scenario?
So I would say, I'd recognize that their achievement, right? To be an entrepreneur is difficult. So I think the first sort of thing I would do is just be like, wow, internally, or maybe don't do that externally, but be like, wow, this guy is this, he's whatever, and recognize, okay, that's something different from me. Maybe I can ask some questions to understand how he got here. And through asking questions, it's not, the value isn't in, again, not what they can give you, or the value is in learning from them. That's the first value. It's to expedite not having to go through what they went through. That's the brilliant thing about having older siblings, right? We don't have to, we can learn from their mistakes through a conversation. So I think that's the first sort of thing, like learning good and bad things in that sector that they're in, right? And then obviously the other piece of value, I guess, is that relationship. If it gets there, also don't force networks if they're not, if this person is in a totally different thing and you're not really getting along and you're not really speaking eye to eye, I mean, then communication and that understanding
Understanding
the cues and be like, okay, well, it was nice meeting you, and move on. You know what I mean? That's also important. I think a lot of people don't, when they network, they don't recognize the importance of that.
No, I appreciate that answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so how would you compare networking to, like, maybe this isn't a fair question, to like mentoring? Like, let's say in a business structure, you are now one of the young economists, and you're this kind of someone above you. How would you differentiate you networking with that person as opposed to that person like mentoring you?
I suppose it comes down to the mentoring relationship. So mentoring is all about it depends on how you define it, but sometimes it's a bit more one-sided in terms of the flow of information and knowledge, right? It's usually I go to someone with my problems and then they help me.
Yeah.
Right? I ask them questions and they provide advice.
Yeah.
Where I guess networking is a bit more of a 50-50 sort of situation.
Yeah.
You also have to sort of hope, I mean, people who understand people ask questions.
Yeah.
So when they ask you questions, be honest and be honest and tell them like it is, like, oh, actually I actually didn't get good grades. Or I actually did, I see you're an entrepreneur. I actually kind of struggled with that. I guess in both situations you should be honest. But in the one in the mentoring one, you have an expectation that you could probably receive some sort of guidance. Whereas in the network, you don't necessarily get that. Yeah, there's no expectation. The expectation is more just sharing ideas. I guess you're also coming to someone more as equals. I'd say when you're networking. Whereas when you're being mentored, you should have some respect. You should have respect for everyone, but you should respect that they probably know more than you.
Yeah. So what would you say then would be the value of mentoring?
I think firstly, your mentor is also your network, right? So the first thing, your mentor is probably your strongest network because they actually have a vested interest in you.
Yeah.
And you can, down the line, actually ask for things from your mentor most of the time. And then I think the other value is, again, getting access of lessons that you don't have to go through again with them. I mean, they know a lot. And I think the third thing is having someone who is able to hold you accountable, right? Someone who you say, hey, I want to do this year. And they'll be like, okay, cool. But you're going to have a repeated interaction with that person. And they're going to be able to hold you accountable.
And they're going to ask you.
And that's the real value add of a mentor.
Yeah. So, and that's something we, in this mentoring program for this year, we focus really on goal setting smart goals, and then ensuring that there's constant feedback, checking up on those goals. Because, people will start off the year and, do their New Year's resolution and their vision board, and then they never check that thing again. And then by the end of the year, like, oh, I wanted to do this. Okay, and then they crumple that and chuck it away. But if you find that you can't be that person for yourself, finding someone that knows a bit more about what you want to get into and asking them to kind of be your accountability partner goes a long way in achieving your goals. Because it's not just that you have to prove to yourself or you have to be accountable to yourself, because sometimes we can be very lenient on ourselves and say, I'll do it tomorrow. But when you have someone to account to and there's a time frame, then you're more likely to actually push to reach that deadline. All right, so if you were a mentor, what would you, to a young person who wants to go into the job market, what would be some of the advices you'd give?
I think often, and I've said this in a lot of my other answers, is just be honest with yourself, recognize what you want to do and align that with what you can do, and align that with what the job market wants, right?
Okay.
So if you have a matric, so if you have just a matric certificate, right, which is perfectly fine, make sure that you're realistic with what you can do, right? There's a lot of job opportunities out there for people who don't have traditional university bachelor's education.
Yeah.
Right? So I'd say that's probably just being honest with yourself, and being proactive.
Yeah.
Be proactive. Try and sort of reach out to people, communicate with them, network as it would to be called, and try and understand what the market wants, because it's difficult for people sitting at home to know what's going on out there. You kind of need to leave your house.
To do your research.
Do your research, do your due diligence of what's going on out there.
Okay, so let's say we have a young person with a matric certificate, right? And they haven't really thought about what skills they have. What would be your advice to direct them in what they should try and expose themselves to? Because I think there's little value of us saying, okay, expose yourself to things, or like check what's out there in the market, but then we're not really able to direct people or give them some sort of filter so that they can use the time a bit more valuably. So someone with a matric certificate, they want to leverage the skills that they may have. What advice would you give in with your knowledge of the economy and how the economy works? Where would their time best be used?
So I noticed on the Provision website, you guys have a link to a test about is it liquidity?
Liquidity. Yeah. It's an aptitude test.
Yeah. So in that test, does it tell you something about yourself? Right?
Yeah.
It tells you a lot.
Does.
It tells you about what you're good at. It tells you about where you would be.
Yeah.
Right. Again, in the labor market, and in any market, information is the most important thing. Right. Information is critical so that we don't waste resource, which is time.
Yeah.
And that's economics as well. So knowing that, okay, I have a matric certificate, and maybe I was actually really good at, I don't know, counting, or maybe I was really good with maths or English or whatever, right? Trying to make that connection between your matric certificate, your aptitude, etc., and the labor market. Will I sit here and tell you what jobs are what fields are popping off right now? No.
Do you know?
Do I know? Well, it depends on it depends on your endowment, right? I mean, it depends what way you're coming from.
Yeah. Okay. No,
we can speak about it. You can ask me questions. I can try and answer them.
Okay. So let's maybe use some of your knowledge as an economist, or your way of thinking. So based on where we are as South Africa, and where society is going, where do you think jobs will start to pop up?
That's a very good question.
It's a very broad question.
It's a very broad question.
Yeah.
So if I'm gonna try and simplify the question, right? Because you're asking me about the universe. Let me talk about one planet. Let me talk about a small. Let me micro size it.
Yeah.
If we think about the Western Cape.
Yes.
Right, the Western Cape, where we are right now. You can go online and look at the makeup of the economy in the Western Cape.
Yeah.
Right, and you can find pretty easily from government reports, economic research, which are the industries that are growing, right? So believe it or not, I don't know if you know this, but the Western Cape or South Africa is one of the biggest exporters of ships or of boats. Did you know that?
I didn't know.
Did you know it blew my mind when I figured it out. But if you just go and read the research, so manufacturing boats. No, I don't know what level of education you need. Maybe you need something technical, maybe a diploma. But there's also sectors around that, you know what I mean, like marketing the boats. Sales. But that's just one place. That's just something, an example.
Yeah.
Another sector that's popping off in the Western Cape, tourism. As you can see, all these digital nomads are coming in. The city of Cape Town was nominated like the top, like best city to live in the world by Time Out magazine. So a lot of people are flocking here for tourism, right? And the tourism sector is good because it's a lower skill sector, right? You don't necessarily need a bachelor's degree to work in it. You don't necessarily, you can work in a number of different jobs in the tourism sector, for example. Another sector that's popping off I keep saying this, but another sector that's growing in the Western Cape is business process outsourcing, or what you and me were an example of what I think a lot of people listening will know are call centers.
Yeah,
right? That is a job that offers people with matric certificates an opportunity to work in an office environment. The pay is all right, and as we look to the future, there's only going to be more and more of those types of jobs, not necessarily just call centers. You're going to have more like sort of online, not necessarily on the phone, but sort of through a portal or through a chat box or chatbot or something like that. So a lot of those services that the first world or the Western world sort of used to ship out to places like India are now kind of coming to South Africa. So that's one sector I'd say is growing. And then the other thing I would say, and this is a shot in the dark, but I think more and more people need to think about entrepreneurship.
That's what I want to come to, yeah.
Like,
this comes to a conversation our students were having. So a lot of them, as Provision, we do try and expose students to careers that are already established. Mostly because it does provide financial stability. And I think that's partly my bias as well. As someone who's a first gen doctor, and I went into medicine because I was like, I can get the grades, I love helping people, I'll make decent money, cool, sorted. But now that I'm a doctor, I'm like, I enjoy medicine, but I also want to do business, low-key. Like, I want to do business, I want to do this, I want to do that. So, like, from our perspective, what's really important is to build some form of capital, if you can. And sometimes you might have to work in a call center, you might have to work at a shop, as a shopkeeper, whatever, in the beginning. If, let's say now you're already unemployed and you don't have any credentials, you have to start somewhere. But the argument that they were making was, what's the point of me even becoming an engineer or becoming an accountant? Because the vision I have for my life, I want to have a penthouse in New York now. I'm not going to, destroy their dreams, but they made a very valid point, is that I won't be able to afford that as an accountant unless the very, not 0.001% of accountants, that's the accountant of Elon Musk or whatever. They'll probably be able to, but the chances are low. And so a lot of them are changing their perspective and saying, well, I actually want to start a business. I want to be my own boss. So how do people kind of go in that direction?
So, again, I think I'm harping on about this. I think it's because I'm an economist about information.
That's why we have you.
Information is the most important commodity there is today.
Information and time.
Information and time is all you really have. The rest of it is just
Like
an excuse for that. It's just a variation of that, right?
Yeah.
But so I think the first thing you have to, obviously, we have the stuff in business studies. Make a business plan. Capital, blah, blah, blah. But you really need to sit and think about what problems are you able to solve, right? In your local community. Just start small. Sometimes starting a business is about starting small and solving problems in your local community, right? So I'm not going to sit here and tell people businesses to start because I am not in that context. I think it's important that you are in the context that you're trying to solve the problem and start the business there. Why do we have so many foreigners who own corner shops in our communities in South Africa? Because they identified that transportation is a major issue in South Africa because of apartheid spatial planning, etc. So they decided that they're going to bring groceries to the people. Right? But they were sort of first movers and they had the capital. Obviously, people weren't able to do that, but they solved the problem that was a local problem. Right. That's just an example of how you get there.
No, 100%. And I think it's really interesting because I think when you grow up in a certain space, it's sometimes difficult for you to identify a problem because you just accept it as this is my environment, it's unchanging. And one of the things, I listen to a lot of podcasts. One of the things I learned was the idea that you can actually mold the world to what you want. Not a lot of people understand that. But not a lot of people understand that if you gain enough knowledge and you put in enough time, you can get almost any outcome you want if you know what the end goal is and you're willing to put in the time and the effort to fulfill the steps. And someone like me, I grew up in a certain environment where things were very difficult and there was no propositions out there. And then I was given this opportunity just because I was academically gifted. I got this opportunity to go to Weinberg, and at that point I realized, okay, if I put in a certain amount of work in the right direction, I can achieve what I want to achieve. And so I think being able to acknowledge that life isn't set in stone and being able to say, things change and I can do something to allow that change to be in my favor is really important. And so being able to, for students to be able to say, there are problems here that I can identify and I can solve and I can make money from, I think it's really valuable. So that's quite interesting how people take that advice into account. So in terms of practical tips, what are some of the habits or mindsets that you believe is critical for long-term success?
I think in terms of long-term success, I think being curious is quite important, right? Always trying to sort of wanting to understand the whys and the reasons for things, and having that sort of built into your routine. And when I say your routine, I mean getting up in the morning and just trying to just making sure I'm just gonna read the headlines. Knowing what's going on in the world. I mean, that really goes far in how you can then sort of start planning your life in which direction it's going.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I get that.
And then I think the basics, right? Sound body, sound health. Don't ignore the other parts of your life, right? Because without it, you're not going to be able to be successful.
That's really true.
And I think consistency. Having a routine and sticking to it and being consistent is very difficult. I'm not very good at it. I struggle. I'm sure you struggle with it.
I think we all do.
And that's fine. That's fine. Like, we've all seen the stuff online, if you only had 10% today and you gave 10%, that's actually 100%. All that funny stuff.
Yeah.
But it's the truth, just being consistent and trying your best as much as you can, not 100% every day, but just, if I'm going to stick to a gym routine, if I'm going to start a business, am I going to be able to maintain motivation? Am I going to be able to, because like we spoke about entrepreneurship is very challenging. And if you're not committed and dedicated to that, anything in your life, you're not going to achieve it. And I think the last thing, and it's connected to all of this, is breaking things into small parts, into manageable chunks. Don't think about today and the end. You know what I mean? Like, think about just a week. Think about life as a day. And what am I going to do today that will be better than what I did yesterday? And you'll find that when you break things into manageable portions, you're able to do it. You get a sense of achievement, and that motivates you.
You get kind of that momentum.
The momentum. And momentum is very important. Like in every aspect of your life. Momentum is key.
Okay. So, I think you shared some really important things for our viewers to think about. And I just wanted to maybe get your insights from an economist perspective, right? If someone's like wanting to become an entrepreneur and they've actually started.
Okay.
Let's say they have this idea, they've started. I feel like with entrepreneurship, there naturally becomes a point where things become difficult. And you're like, maybe my idea wasn't as great as I thought, or, I'm not getting the resources, etc., etc. How do you then pivot from that? Like, let's say now you've tried this thing, you've failed. How do you pivot and still carry that desire to succeed? I don't know if that makes sense.
I guess the question is, how do you deal with failure? Is that the question?
Yes.
In some sense.
But specifically in that
entrepreneurship.
field. Yeah.
So I'd say once you fail that adventure, you only you fail because you gave up most of the time. But okay, sometimes you fail because of financial pressures, etc. Okay, I get that. I guess you have to then look back and identify what you did well and identify what you did not as well, right? And take record of it. Really like journal it or sort of understand the learnings for the next time you go again. And also just accept that entrepreneurs fail, right? I don't know if I'm answering the question.
Yes, no, you are. Okay. So I think in closing, are there any specific programs or websites, or organizations that you'd recommend young people explore to get the information that they need? That core information to go into the market and figure out how they can best solve a problem and make some money off that.
So this might be a bit of a long answer.
That's okay.
Yeah. So I'd say if you're thinking about careers, right, go look at the critical skills list that the government publishes, right? That is the list of all the jobs that the government is willing to give visas to foreigners for, because we just have such a shortage of them. And go through the list. There's quite a lot of jobs there, and try and find something that, hey, I think I can become that. You'll be surprised what's there. There's unorthodox jobs. There's skills. There's skills that you never even heard about.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I had a look at it. I think on the Provision website they also have the in-demand jobs.
Yes.
And some of the things I was like, I didn't even know that was a real thing.
So I think the first place is go to the Provision website. There's a lot of resources there. I checked it out. And then the critical skills list. You should start familiarizing yourself with LinkedIn. Start familiarizing yourself. Actually, maybe get a LinkedIn. That might also be a good thing. But if you don't want to work, necessarily, if work isn't the thing that you see yourself doing, and you want to be an entrepreneur, and you have a business idea, and you think it's pretty good, or if you're already trading, look at there's some support given by the government. I think people don't give the government as much credit as they deserve. So you have things like the small. So there's a department, this Department of Small Business Development, which aims to help MSMEs gain access to training, financing, and other sort of non-financial things that you need to get a business going. So whether that be, how do I start a business? How do I write a business plan? How do I approach finance? How do I register for a business? You can't just do these things informally. You can, but it's better. You can have access to more resources once you formalize your business, right? So you have the what the government is now calling SEFTA. So it's the Small Enterprise Finance and Development Agency, which is under the Department of Small Business Development, which is an entity that's dedicated to what I just said, actually providing finance and in the form of what we call concessional loans, but that's actually just a fancy word for very low cost loans. So very low interest rates. I'm talking about 5% over a 60-month period, without having to pay the loan back for a year. So this is I'm just giving examples. The type
people
of
do their own research.
Do your own research. And then if you're thinking a bit more smaller scale, there's the National Youth Development Agency, which has some funds dedicated to, the National Youth Development Agency also deals with, if you want employment, so the YES program has opportunities there. And then they also have sort of entrepreneurial development, where you also get what we call grants from the government, not your SASA grant. These are business grants. The entrepreneur, this is, if you have a sound business plan, your business has, it's important to formalize your business if you have a business, right? Because then you're able to get finance. Those grants, they have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of rands of grant money, which you don't have to pay back to start businesses, to start, to get you, to fulfill, your financing needs, etc. But again, coming back to everything I'm saying, read, use the internet, research, use ChatGPT, research what's out there. You may think that something is like, why would the government give us free money to start businesses? Sometimes they do. You know what I mean? There's a lot of resources out there. We just need to find them.
I agree. And I think that's a big part of what Provision is trying to do. So definitely check out our website, because we do try and, our main goal essentially is to be a hub for information, a hub for resources. So we don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to recreate all these resources that's already out there. We want to be the place you come to find these resources. So we have some links to the Western Cape websites. We have links to bursary websites, that sort of thing. So do check out our website. Kreyan, so we're trying this new thing where we ask like a random question, like an unscripted type of thing. So let me put one to you to close.
Sure.
If I had, for example, I had 10,000 rand. This is my savings. I'm a young student. I've been saving. I have 10,000 rand, right? And I want to make more of that 10,000 rand. What advice would you give them?
What advice would I give to you? I'd have to first, economists are annoying, so we always have to ask other questions, but I think you have to ask these questions internally.
Yeah.
Right? What is the sort of rate of return? How much money do I want to get to? Right? If I have 10,000 rand, do I want to make it, your average returns from the stock market are only about 10 to 12, maybe 15% a year. If you translate that from 10,000, that's only about 1,500 rand a year. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but with the power of compound interest, etc., it can become a lot of money over time. But if you want to make, it's a challenging question, because 10,000 rand sounds like a lot of money, but in the investing game, it's not necessarily going to get you far.
Okay.
Hate to say it.
So let's say 100,000.
If I have 100,000 rand, if I had 100,000 rand, I'll plug you with the secret that I've been doing.
Okay.
This is left field. This isn't like philosophical. This is actually something I've been doing.
Okay.
I've been doing what's called crypto arbitrage.
What is happening?
So arbitrage is taking advantage of the difference between. So for example, let's say you're an economy and I'm an economy, and I'm selling fizzes for 10 rand, and you're selling fizzes for 12 rand, but we're in different economies. Arbitrage is basically exploiting those price differences. So buying the fizzes in my country for 10 rand and selling it in your country for 12 rand.
Okay.
That's what arbitrage is.
Okay.
So there's a few companies out there that do, and I think it is a legitimate thing. There is a slight price differential between the crypto market in South Africa and the crypto market overseas. It's about 1 to 3% depending on the time of day, depending on the factors that are driving this.
Yeah.
So what they do is basically they use your foreign currency accounts allowance to trade cryptocurrencies, and they're not trading like they're not doing head and shoulders, all that fancy stuff. They're not doing technical analysis. They're basically just buying crypto in another country and selling it in South Africa and giving you that 1 to 3% difference.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know if you have 100,000 rand, you can do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's my secret way.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's
I get into
it's
that.
a bit frank and blunt, but
Yeah.
that's all.
Okay, so the fact that I didn't know about that, also highlights the fact that like, if you have information, that's already half the job done. You're making money.
100%.
So I think that's a big take home. But Kreyan, thank you so much for your time. You've
Thanks
been
for
a
having
lovely
me.
guest. You've shared so much nuggets of wisdom. I think people are going to have a different perspective after hearing this conversation, and hopefully this conversation leads people into financial freedom.
Hopefully.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.